She asked to borrow my license photo, said it was for the slideshow. But there it was, taped to the front door of the venue, slashed with red paint. No entry. Under it, 40 guests tried not to stare as my daughter, in her wedding gown, looked down and said nothing. Then the usher handed me a second betrayal, a fake invitation. My name crossed out, my title stripped, and behind all of it, my ex-wife, grinning like she'd buried me alive. But I hadn't come empty-handed. My car held every document tied to my daughter's inheritance, and they'd made one mistake. They thought I'd stay outside. My name is Walter Whitaker, and I'm 75 years old. Every morning at 5, I polish my old sedan before driving to the diner for coffee and wheat toast. My daughter Emily, whom I raised alone, is getting married today, while my ex-wife, Margaret, who left us for a wealthier man, has spent years looking down her nose at my modest life. Her new husband, Charles, never misses a chance to remind me how I don't belong in their social circle. But they don't know about the tracking device I installed in my car years ago, or the carefully documented records in my glove box. 20 years of double shifts left my hands calloused, but they taught me patience. These wealthy folks think they can crush my dignity with their polished smiles. But I've learned to wait out storms. Let me start from the beginning. I arrived at the Belmont Hotel just as the evening light was fading. You know that golden hour when everything looks softer, kinda? Well, that's what I was hoping for anyway. The moment those revolving doors spun me into the lobby, I was hit with a wall of scents. Expensive cologne mixing with vanilla candles, all of it bouncing off those gleaming marble floors they'd just polished for the occasion. Have you ever walked into a room and known right in your gut that something was wrong? That's how it felt when I spotted the ornate stand holding the wedding programs. I'd helped pay for those programs, mind you. Cream-colored paper with gold lettering, real fancy stuff. But when I picked one up, my fingers went numb. There it was, right under Order of Ceremony. Charles Henderson, father of the bride. Not Walter Whitaker, not me. The man who'd shown up to every school play, who'd learned to French braid hair from YouTube videos, who'd worked nights at the hardware store just to afford dance lessons. Apparently, I didn't exist. "Sir?" The usher, some college kid in a borrowed tux, cleared his throat. "I can show you to your seat, but the program is quite clear about the roles." His voice had that rehearsed tone, like he'd been prepped for this moment. I remember when Emily was about 6, she got stung by a bee. That same knot I felt in my stomach watching her cry, it came back full force right then. Around me, guests were doing that thing people do when they're trying not to stare. You know the type. Quick glances, whispered conversations behind programs. The click of expensive heels on marble made me look up. Margaret, my ex-wife, was gliding past, arm in arm with Charles. 20 years hadn't changed her much. Still wore her hair in that perfect blonde sweep, still had that smile that never quite reached her eyes. Charles, with his tailored suit and country club tan, nodded at me like I was some distant acquaintance he couldn't quite place. "Walter," Margaret said, her voice dripping honey-coated venom. "How appropriate you could make it." The way she emphasized appropriate made it sound like anything but. The string quartet in the corner started tuning up, and that's when I saw her. My Emily. She was standing across the foyer, half hidden behind a column, looking like something out of a bridal magazine in her white dress. My little girl, who used to fall asleep on my chest while I worked on billing statements, who'd insisted on wearing my old work boots to play carpenter when she was 7. I raised my hand, tried to catch her eye. Remember how we used to wave to each other every morning when I dropped her at school? But this time she looked down, her fingers twisting the ribbon on her bouquet. That hurt worse than any paper could print. I was about to walk over to Sandra, the wedding coordinator. We'd met twice during planning, when something changed in the air. You know that feeling when a room shifts? Started with a chuckle, then another, building into this wave of uncomfortable laughter coming from the entrance. When I turned around, time seemed to stop. There, taped to the heavy wooden door like some kind of wanted poster, was my face. Not just any photo, the one from my driver's license that Emily had asked to borrow last month. Across it, someone had painted 2 words in thick red strokes. No entry. The thing about humiliation is, it has a sound. It's the sound of 40 people trying not to gasp all at once. It's the sound of patent leather shoes shuffling on marble. It's the sound of your own heart, beating so loud you're sure everyone can hear it. That moment stretched out like taffy, slow and sticky and impossible to break free from. In my mind, I could hear my father's voice from decades ago. A man's dignity isn't in how others treat him, but in how he carries himself when they do. So I stood there, straight-backed, letting the weight of all those stares press against me like a physical thing. I made my way over to Sandra, the wedding coordinator. We'd met twice during planning. Nice woman, always had this little notebook with color-coded tabs. But now she wouldn't meet my eyes. Sandra, I kept my voice low, dignified. There seems to be some confusion about my role here. She fidgeted with her earpiece, glancing over my shoulder. Mr. Whitaker, I'm so sorry, but there's been a change in the arrangements. A change? The word came out harder than I meant it to. I pulled out my invitation, the original one, cream-colored with gold lettering that matched the programs. I have my invitation right here. Sandra's face tightened. She reached into her folder and produced another invitation, identical to mine except for one crucial detail. Where mine listed me as father of the bride, this one simply read, guest. Mr. Henderson was very specific about the exclusivity arrangements. She lowered her voice to barely above a whisper. He's made substantial prepayments to ensure the family's wishes are respected. My stomach dropped. Family's wishes. Since when did Charles Henderson get to decide who was family? I glanced around the foyer. 2 security guards in dark suits had materialized near the entrance, trying to look casual but watching me like hawks. The message was clear. Make a scene, and you'll be escorted out. Across the room, Emily caught my eye. My girl, she'd always had her mother's grace, but my heart. I saw it working in her now, the way her hands twisted together, the slight forward movement of her feet. Her eyes were bright, with unshed tears, and for a moment I thought she might break free, might come to me. But then the bridesmaids swooped in, a flock of lavender dresses and practiced smiles, shepherding her toward the photography area. Time for pictures, they chirped, as if this were all perfectly normal, as if they weren't helping orchestrate my erasure from my own daughter's wedding. That's when I caught Margaret's expression. My ex-wife was watching me with the same look she'd had 20 years ago when she announced she was leaving. That satisfied little smile that said she'd calculated everything, that she was 3 moves ahead and enjoying every second of my slow realization. She wanted me to explode, to shout, to demand, to make the kind of scene that would justify having security throw me out. 20 years of country club manners hadn't changed her core. She was still the woman who thought emotions were weapons. I steadied myself, smoothed my tie. Sandra, I said, keeping my voice even, I just want to drop off Emily's gift. Surely that's allowed. My hand went to my jacket pocket and stopped. The gift was in my car. Yes, but more importantly, so were the trust documents. 20 pages of carefully prepared instructions, account numbers, schedules for Emily's inheritance. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd saved, all secured in my sedan's glove box. The realization hit me like ice water in my veins. This wasn't about humiliating me at all. The no entry sign, the forged invitation, the security guards. It was all theater, a smokescreen. They wanted me away from my car. I looked back at Margaret, saw the gleam in her eye sharpen. She'd always been clever with money. It's what attracted her to Charles in the first place. Of course she'd know about the trust. Of course she'd want control of it before the papers were finalized. Mr. Whitaker? Sandra was still waiting for my response, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Through the glass doors, I could see my old sedan sitting in the parking lot. Inside that glove box was everything I'd built for Emily's future, and now I understood exactly why they wanted me inside this building, trapped in their little drama while they helped themselves to what really mattered. I stepped out into the evening air, letting the door click shut behind me. The breeze carried a mix of kitchen steam from the venue's vents and warm rubber from the constant flow of arriving cars. You know that smell, like money and expectations all rolled into one. I made my way to my sedan, still parked right where I'd left it. Nothing looked disturbed, but you don't get to my age without learning to check twice. The door opened with its familiar creak. I'd never got around to fixing that. Figured it was better security than any alarm system. Inside, everything was just as I'd left it. Maintenance logs stacked neat in the glove box. And beneath them, That sealed manila envelope with Emily's trust documents. 2 hours and 45 minutes, I muttered, checking my watch. The notary, Mrs. Chen, was due at midnight sharp. She'd been handling my affairs for 15 years, precise as a Swiss clock. Until those papers got her signature, they were just expensive promises. I pulled out my phone and dialed Frank's number. Frank had been my lawyer before he retired, helped me set up the trust in the first place. If anyone would know how to handle this mess legally, it'd be him. The phone rang once, twice, then kicked to voicemail. "Frank, it's Walter. I'm at Emily's wedding and, well, there's a situation. Call me when you can." Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I could still salvage something from this evening. I walked back to the entrance, rehearsing what I'd say. Just asking for a quiet seat in the back, nothing more. Wouldn't even need to be near the family tables. But the security guard stepped forward before I got within 10 feet of the door. The bigger one, crew cut, earpiece like he was Secret Service, held up his hand. "Sir, we have strict instructions from the venue management. I only want... No exceptions, sir. Please return to your vehicle, or we'll have to contact local authorities." Have you ever noticed how some threats sound perfectly polite? Like they're offering you coffee instead of telling you to get lost from your own daughter's wedding? I retreated to my sedan, leaning against the hood where I could watch the constant dance of valets running back and forth. They moved like they'd rehearsed it. Grab keys, sprint to car, drive off, sprint back. Over and over like some kind of mechanical ballet. From where I stood, I could see straight through the venue's glass doors to the reception hall beyond. A concrete column near the entrance gave me a decent angle. If I positioned myself right, I could keep an eye on both the car and anyone coming or going. The minutes ticked by. Guests were still arriving, though the steady stream had slowed to a trickle. Music drifted out whenever the doors opened. Something classical, probably picked by Margaret. She always did prefer Vivaldi to the Beatles. Then I heard it. The low rumble of a diesel engine. A tow truck, yellow and rust-spotted, idling at the mouth of the street. One of the valets, young kid, couldn't have been more than 20, pointed in my direction. My jaw clenched. Margaret might not have my car keys, but she didn't need them if she could get the whole car towed. Probably had some story ready about an abandoned vehicle or a parking violation. The sort of thing that'd take hours to sort out at the impound lot. Hours I didn't have. I straightened up, tugging my jacket smooth. Time to see just how serious that tow truck driver was about earning his fee tonight. You see, there's something about reaching my age that people tend to forget. We've had decades to learn how the world really works. And right now, watching that tow truck driver size up my situation, I had a feeling I was about to put some of that hard-earned knowledge to good use. The tow truck's diesel engine grumbled like a hungry beast as the operator stepped out, clipboard in hand. I'd seen his type before, just doing his job, probably had quotas to meet. But I hadn't spent 40 years negotiating with suppliers and contractors without learning a thing or two about handling people. I pulled my wallet out as I walked toward him, my steps measured and calm. You know how it is. Show panic, and folks start thinking you've got something to hide. "Evening?" I said, fishing out my registration before he could even ask. "Walter Whitaker, that's my sedan right there." He glanced at the papers, then at his clipboard. "Got a call about an unauthorized vehicle. As you can see, I'm right here with the car." I kept my voice pleasant but firm. "Registration's current, insurance is up to date, and I'm parked legally in a guest space for my daughter's wedding." The operator, his name tag read, "Mike," scratched his head. "Look, Mr. Whitaker, I don't want any trouble, but the venue management called you because they thought the car was abandoned," I finished for him. "But it's not abandoned if the owner's standing right here, is it?" He shifted his weight, looking between me and his clipboard. I could see the wheels turning. Was this worth the hassle? The commission from one tow versus potentially towing a legally parked car with the owner present? "Tell you what," I added. "I'll move it the moment there's any actual violation. You've got my word on that." Mike sighed, then nodded. "Just keep it accessible, all right?" He turned back toward his truck, and I allowed myself a small smile. Sometimes the best victories are the quiet ones. "Walter Whitaker, is that you?" I turned at the familiar voice, and there was Frank Thompson, grinning like we were back in his office 15 years ago. His suit was a little more worn now, his hair a lot grayer, but that sharp look in his eyes hadn't changed a bit. "Frank," I said, relief washing through me. I tried calling. "Phone's been acting up. Say, what are you doing out here? Shouldn't you be inside with Emily?" My jaw tightened. That's complicated. I pulled out both invitations, the original and the forged replacement. Margaret's been busy. Frank studied them, his old lawyer's eyes catching every detail. I filled him in quickly, the program listing another man as father of the bride, the no entry sign, the whole humiliating show. When I mentioned the trust documents in the glove box, his head snapped up. The notarized papers, for Emily's inheritance? Everything's in there. Margaret must have figured it out somehow. She's trying to keep me away until she can get to them. Frank's expression hardened. She always did know how to play the long game. He glanced at his watch. When's the notary due? Midnight, Mrs. Chen. Okay, look, these wedding receptions all follow the same pattern. First dance is usually about an hour in, gives the photographers time to get their formal shots. That's when everyone's attention will be on the dance floor. I saw where he was going. Security gets distracted. Exactly. Plus, most of the staff will be busy. With dinner service, it's our best window. We spent the next few minutes working out the details. Frank would engage the security guards. He still had his old bar association card, could spin some story about venue liability. Meanwhile, I'd move the car to the side entrance closer to where Mrs. Chen would arrive. Simple and clean, Frank said. Just how we used to run depositions, remember? I did remember. Back when things were simpler, when my biggest worry was making sure Emily had lunch money for school. Speaking of which, I reached for my keys, patting my jacket pocket. Empty. Tried the other pocket. Nothing. My heart started hammering as I checked my pants pockets, then patted down my jacket again. That's when I heard it, the soft chirp of my sedan's locks disengaging. My head snapped up just in time to see the headlights blink twice. Frank grabbed my arm. Walter, but I was, already moving, watching helplessly as my own car's engine purred to life in the growing darkness. I lunged toward my car, but a valet in a crisp red vest stepped between us, hands raised apologetically. Sir, I'm sorry, but we've been instructed to relocate all vehicles from this area. That's my car, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger bubbling up. Turn it off, now. Management's orders, sir. The young man's professional smile never wavered. Safety regulations? The hell with safety regulations, I snapped. Those are my private documents in there. A security guard materialized at my elbow, all squared shoulders and practiced authority. Sir, we cannot allow guests to interfere with venue operations. It's a liability issue. You want to talk liability? I nearly said it, but 20 years of careful planning wouldn't be undone by losing my temper now. I forced myself to take a deep breath, watching my sedan idle there, so close yet completely out of reach. Frank stepped forward, his voice warm and casual as summer lemonade. Evening, gentlemen. Maybe we could speak with your supervisor. Sort this out properly. He flashed his old bar association card. There are some concerning legal implications here. The security guard's radio crackled. The valet was already sliding behind my steering wheel. I checked my watch. 2 hours until Mrs. Chen arrived. 2 hours before everything I'd built for Emily could disappear into Margaret's greedy hands. The sedan began rolling forward, brake lights glowing like dying embers in the growing dark. I mentally mapped the venue's layout. Main entrance, delivery dock, 2 service roads I'd spotted on the drive-in. How many other exits had I missed? Let me handle this, Frank murmured, then raised his voice. Now about those contract limitations regarding guest property. He drew the security guard into a conversation thick with legal terms, creating the distraction I needed. I slipped away from the group, ducking behind a row of precisely trimmed hedges. The sedan's taillights flickered through the branches as it turned toward a service lane I hadn't noticed before. My shoes crunched on gravel as I paralleled its path, staying just out of sight. The car crawled past a loading dock, then approached a raised security gate. Heart-pounding, I watched it glide underneath, heading toward what looked like a maintenance garage or storage building set back in the shadows. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling slightly as I typed, SE corner past loading dock going behind Grey Bull G. Sent it to Frank. The sedan's bumper disappeared around the building's corner. I quickened my pace, careful to stay hidden behind a line of parked service vehicles. When I reached the bend, I pressed myself against the cool brick wall and peered around. Nothing. The lane stretched empty into darkness, my car nowhere in sight. Remember when Emily was little and we'd play hide and seek? She thought if she couldn't see me, I couldn't see her. but I always knew where to look. Behind the couch, under her bed, in the laundry basket. Just like old times, honey. Daddy's still looking. From somewhere inside the venue, music swelled, the reception moving forward without me, while Margaret probably sat smugly at the family table, thinking she'd won. My fingers curled into fists. Not this time. I crept down the empty service lane, every sense straining for a clue. A flash of chrome, the sound of a door, anything. But there was only the muffled thrum of celebration bleeding through the walls, and the whisper of evening wind through the trees. At the end of the lane, tire tracks in the loose gravel curved sharply right, then vanished under another gate. Beyond it, darkness swallowed whatever path they'd taken. I backtracked to the loading dock where Frank waited, his tie loosened and forehead gleaming with sweat. Kitchen staff wheeled enormous racks of covered plates past us, the smell of garlic and roasted beef making my stomach turn. Not from hunger, from knowing Margaret was probably already inside, settling into her victory like it was a warm bath. "Any luck?" Frank asked quietly. "Trail goes cold at the second gate." I rubbed my jaw, feeling the day's stubble. "But they've got to log those keys somewhere, right?" A valet in his 20s hustled past, arms full of empty water pitchers. I stepped into his path. "Excuse me, son, need to check your key custody log. Missing set from a high silver Buick." The kid's customer service smile flickered. "Sorry, sir, that's internal documentation. Against policy to—" "Policy?" I kept my voice gentle, the way I used to when Emily tried dodging her homework. "Son, those are my keys, my car, my property. You ever notice how young folks get that deer-in-headlights look when procedure meets reality?" He glanced toward the kitchen doors like they might save him. "Manager handles all vehicle disputes," he recited. "She'll be back after the first dance." Frank snorted. "Convenient timing. It's just protocol." The valet edged sideways. "Nothing personal." I watched him scurry off, remembering how Emily used to run the same way when she knew she was in trouble. The memory stung more than usual tonight. "First dance," Frank mused, checking his watch. "That gives us maybe 15 minutes to get positioned." Through the service, corridor walls, we could hear the MC working the crowd. Introductions of the wedding party. Polite laughter at rehearsed jokes, every minute feeling like sand through my fingers. I checked my own watch. 90 minutes until Mrs. Chen arrived with the notary paperwork. My throat tightened. "We're running out of time, Frank." "Then we document everything." He pulled out his phone. "Time-stamped photos, video if we can get it. Build a chain of custody record for the notary. If they're tampering with legal documents, I know. I'd spent 30 years handling maintenance records. Evidence was everything. But right now, all I could think about was Emily. Was she dancing yet? Had she noticed I was missing? Or had Margaret's poison finally convinced her I'd abandoned her like everyone said I would? The DJ's voice boomed through the walls. Something about the happy couple's first dance. Frank grabbed my arm. "That's our cue. You ready?" I nodded, already moving. We hustled down the side corridor, past stacked chairs and abandoned cleaning carts. The service garage door loomed ahead, institutional grey paint peeling at the corners. Ever get that feeling when you know you're about to walk into trouble? The air gets thick, your skin prickles, and every instinct screams at you to turn around. But sometimes you can't turn around. Sometimes the only way out is through. I pressed my ear against the cool metal door. At first, just the muffled thrum of the reception music. Then, there, the soft whisper of papers being shuffled. Frank positioned himself by the handle, phone ready to record. He met my eyes and mouthed, 1, 2. The music from the ballroom swelled. Some pop song Emily used to play on repeat during her teenage years. The one about never giving up, never letting go. Funny how life works sometimes, isn't it? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every choice that had led to this moment. Margaret thought she could erase me with a sign and a few bribes. She thought money could buy her the right to steal my daughter's future. She was about to learn otherwise. I nodded to Frank. Time to show them what happens when you back an old maintenance man into a corner. You know that moment when you're watching a crime happen right in front of you, and your blood runs so cold it feels like ice in your veins. That's how I felt, easing that service door open just enough to peek through. The garage was dimmer than I expected, lit by a single fluorescent strip that hummed like an angry wasp. But even in that weak light, I could make out Margaret's silhouette bent over my car's passenger side. She was wearing some sparkly evening number that probably cost more than my monthly pension. "Check under the maintenance logs." Margaret's voice carried that familiar sharp edge, the one she'd always used when money was involved. "Walter's obsessive about his records. He'll have filed everything chronologically." Frank's phone camera peeked past my shoulder, recording silently. I could feel him trying not to breathe too loud. Through the gap, I spotted Richard, my daughter's new father-in-law, standing beside the open glove box. His gold cufflinks caught the light every time he moved, little flashes of wealth that seemed to mock everything I stood for. He was rifling through my folder like he owned it, those manicured fingers flipping through pages I'd carefully organized over decades. "Found the trust paperwork," Richard announced, sounding pleased with himself. "Original copies, just like you said." A phone camera clicked rapidly. They were documenting everything before taking it. My throat closed up tight. Those papers represented every extra shift I'd worked, every penny I'd saved, every sacrifice I'd made to secure Emily's future. And here they were, treating it like their personal treasure hunt. Remember what I said about staying calm? Well, that was getting harder by the second. Then my knee bumped something metal behind me, one of those industrial mop buckets on wheels. The clatter seemed to echo through the whole corridor like a gunshot. Everyone in the garage froze. I could hear Margaret's sharp intake of breath. What was that? Richard's whisper carried clearly in the sudden silence. Footsteps approached the door, heavy ones. Security guard had to be. Frank and I exchanged looks in the darkness. He gestured backward, and we retreated a couple steps, pressing ourselves against the wall, where the shadows were deepest. The hinges creaked. Lord, that sound went right through me. And a wedge of brighter light spilled into the hallway. I held my breath, feeling my heart hammering so hard, I was sure they'd hear it. A flashlight beam swept the corridor. The guard was a big fellow, filled the whole doorframe as he leaned out. "Clear," he called back over his shoulder, probably just one of those cleaning carts rolling loose again. The door swung wider, pushing toward where I stood flattened against the wall. Another inch and it would pin me completely. Frank had managed to tuck himself into an alcove, his phone still aimed steady despite everything. You ever play hide-and-seek as a kid? Remember that feeling when someone's about to find you and your whole body goes rigid with anticipation? Multiple that by about 1,000, and you'll understand how I felt in that moment. The guard took one step into the hallway, his back to me now. Through the wider opening I could see Margaret stuffing papers into her designer clutch while Richard kept watch. The trust documents, my daughter's security, disappearing into that glittery bag like they were nothing more than restaurant receipts. My hands curled into fists, not from anger, though there was plenty of that. No, I was fighting something deeper, the urge to step out of those shadows and confront them right there. But Frank's plan required patience. Let them think they're winning. Document everything. The guard's radio crackled. "Check in, Sector 4. He reached for his shoulder mic. One wrong move from me now, one scuff of my shoe or heavy breath, and everything would fall apart. The door kept creeping wider. The guard's radio squawked again. He keyed his mic and stepped fully into the hallway, mumbling something about a routine check. My stomach turned to ice as I watched Margaret tuck away the last of my papers. 25 years of careful planning dissolving in the sweep of a manicured hand. The weight of it hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about some documents or even the money. It was about erasing me completely. They'd planned it all. The humiliation at the door, the program switch, and now this final theft. How many others were in on it? The coordinator? The valets? Maybe even... No, I couldn't let myself think about Emily right then. For a moment, just one weak moment, I felt every one of my 75 years. My shoulders sagged. Maybe this was how it ended. An old man outmaneuvered, standing in shadows while younger, sharper people carved up what he'd built. You ever had that feeling? When it seems easier to just walk away and let the night swallow whatever pride you've got? Left? Frank's hand found my shoulder in the darkness. His grip was steady, grounding. "Walt," he whispered, barely a breath. "Old habits, remember? What did you install?" "The tracker." "Of course, the tracker. You see, after Margaret left, I developed what Emily used to call my backup everything habit. Every receipt copied, every conversation logged, every maintenance record filed. And yes, a simple tracking device installed under the dashboard, synced to my phone just in case. My fingers shook slightly as I pulled up the app. The blue dot pulsed on the screen, proving the car's location and timestamp. Each ping created a digital record, proof of custody that no one could deny. The guard's footsteps echoed down the hallway, moving away. Frank edged his phone camera through the gap again, and I felt something shift inside me. Despair hardened into purpose, helplessness into method. We had the tools. We had the evidence. Now we just needed to document everything. "Clear angle on the plate?" I whispered. Frank nodded, adjusting his position. Through the door, I could see him framing the shot perfectly. Margaret's face as she sorted through my papers, Richard's standing watch, and the sedan's license plate visible in the background. Everything the notary would need to understand exactly what happened here. I eased the door open another inch, careful to keep the hinges silent. The fluorescent light spilled across the floor in a wider band now, giving Frank's camera an unobstructed view. He was capturing it all, the documents spread across the hood, the furtive glances, the way they handled my property like it was their birthright. "Streaming now," Frank murmured, his thumb moving across his phone screen. "Sending direct to Gloria's secure server." Gloria, our notary, was old school like me. She believed in backup everything too. I watched the upload indicator start to spin, each completed percentage another nail in Margaret's coffin. The timestamp ticked away in the corner of Frank's screen, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence. You know what the strangest part was? Standing there in that shadowed hallway, watching the stream percentage climb, I felt something I hadn't expected. Calm. Not the forced kind I'd been clinging to earlier, but something deeper. The calm that comes from knowing you've prepared for this moment, without even realizing it. Margaret's voice drifted through the gap. "We need to move these to the safe before—" The rest of her sentence was cut off by a sharp ding from Frank's phone. The upload had finished. Every second of their scheme was now safely documented on Gloria's server, waiting like a loaded gun. I stepped into the doorway, letting the fluorescent light wash over my pressed suit and silver hair. Funny how standing straight can make you feel 10 years younger and twice as tall. Frank's phone kept rolling behind me, its lens catching every twitch and tell. "Good evening, Margaret." My voice came out steady, like I was discussing the weather. "Richard," I nodded to my ex-wife's new friend. "I see you found my filing system interesting." Margaret's face flickered between shock and that old familiar contempt. "Walter, this is a private family matter. You shouldn't—" "Let me help you with the inventory," I cut in. Professional as a bank manager. File A1, Emily's trust documentation, original copy, 43 pages including appendices. File B2, maintenance logs with GPS tracking records, showing continuous custody since— I made a show of checking my watch. 6:15 p.m. when I arrived. Richard stepped forward, all polished shoes and pressed confidence. "Now see here, Whitaker. We're simply protecting marital assets. The family's interests. The trust names Emily as sole beneficiary," I said, watching their faces. "And our notary Gloria is quite interested in tonight's proceedings." I gestured to Frank's phone. "She's receiving this live stream directly to her secure server." As if on cue, Frank's phone chirped. He glanced at the screen. "Gloria's online now. She's requesting continued visibility on all documents." You should have seen how fast that room changed. One of Richard's cronies, some sharp-suited fellow I'd never met, tried sliding papers back into my envelope like he was handling live snakes. His fingers trembled slightly, and I couldn't help but notice how he'd lost that smug look from earlier. "Page 37 appears to be missing from the sequence," I noted calmly. "Along with pages 41 through 43, would you mind placing that envelope on the hood where Gloria can see it clearly?" Margaret's makeup couldn't quite hide how her complexion had gone ashy. "Walter, you're making this unnecessarily dramatic. We can discuss this like adults." "We are discussing it, Margaret, with proper documentation and witnesses, just like adults should." I turned to the security guard who'd been hovering uncertainly by the door. "Sir, would you mind confirming your badge number for the record? Gloria will want to note who had access to this area." The guard straightened, probably realizing he'd walked into something bigger than a simple venue dispute. More staff were gathering in the doorway now, Caterers, valets, curious wedding guests who'd followed the whispers. Their murmurs created a soft backdrop to the scene. A sudden blast of sirens made everyone jump. Just the DJ's sound effects, Frank muttered. But the tension in the room had ratcheted up another notch. Richard tried one last angle. The venue has strict policies about unauthorized recording. The venue also has policies about tampering with legal documents, I replied. Now, about those missing pages. The crony with the envelope set it carefully on the hood, like he was defusing a bomb. Smart man. He'd figured out which way the wind was blowing. I stayed in the doorway, keeping my voice level and my shoulders squared. Gloria's asking for a page count verification, I said, though Frank hadn't signaled anything. Sometimes a good bluff is as useful as a good hand. Would you mind spreading those documents where her camera can catch the numbers? Margaret's fingers clenched around her clutch purse. I recognized that white-knuckled grip. It was the same one she'd had 25 years ago, when her lies about the credit card debt finally came to light. Some habits don't change, I suppose. The room had gone quiet except for the muffled thump of wedding music through the walls and the soft rustle of papers being arranged on the car hood. Frank's steady hand kept recording, capturing every detail. The scattered documents, the guilty faces, the way the security guard had shifted to stand closer to my side of the door. I watched as years of careful planning and quiet preparation finally paid off, not with shouting or threats, but with the simple, devastating power of documented truth. I stepped forward, keeping my movements deliberate and calm. "I'll take custody of that envelope now," I said, my voice carrying just enough to reach the growing crowd at the door. Years of dealing with difficult customers at the hardware store had taught me the value of a steady tone. Moving to the sedan's hood, I positioned myself where Frank's camera had the clearest view. The envelope felt warm, like it had soaked up all their guilty handling. Funny how paper can tell stories beyond the words printed on it. "Frank, let's do this by the book," I said, carefully opening the envelope. "Gloria needs to see everything." "Ready when you are, Walt." Frank adjusted his phone's angle, professional as any courthouse videographer. I lifted the first page, holding it steady. Trust document cover sheet dated March 15th. File reference number at top right corner reads 873-2. The paper trembled slightly in my hands, not from fear but from a lifetime of pride finally finding its moment. Page by page, we worked through the stack. Schedule A, beneficiary designation. Schedule B, asset inventory. Each document title rolled off my tongue like I was reading Sunday Psalms. 25 years of double shifts and careful planning had taught me the value of attention to detail. Margaret shifted her weight, those designer heels probably getting uncomfortable on the concrete floor. She'd always hated being caught in her schemes. "This is absolutely ridiculous," she muttered, but her voice had lost its edge. My phone buzzed. A text from Gloria. Receiving stream, clearly. All pages visible. ETA 4 minutes. "The notary confirms receipt," I announced, watching Richard's face tighten. His fingers flew across his phone screen, probably trying to salvage whatever scheme they'd cooked up. You'd think a man with that much money would know when to fold a losing hand. Frank panned his camera slowly across each page as I read out section headings and dates. The growing audience in the doorway had gone quiet, like they were watching a crime scene investigation. In a way, I suppose they were. "Note the validation stamps on pages 12 through 15, I said, angling the papers toward better light. The familiar scent of old paper and ink brought back memories of late nights at my kitchen table, organizing these documents while Emily slept upstairs. Back then, I'd wondered if I was being too cautious. Now I knew better. Richard's right hand kept straying to his jacket pocket, the one where I'd spotted that forged invitation earlier. The corner was visible now, peeking out like a guilty conscience. Frank noticed it too, and adjusted his camera angle slightly. "Is that the revised invitation you distributed tonight?" I asked innocently, noting how Richard's hand froze. "The one that differs from the original I received last month. Perhaps we should add it to the record." A collective intake of breath from the doorway told me our audience understood exactly what that meant. The sound of it rippled through the garage like a wave. My phone vibrated again. "Gloria, 3 minutes out. Keep everything in view." Margaret took half a step toward the door, but the crowd of guests and staff had grown too thick for an easy escape. I caught her eye and saw something I hadn't seen in decades. uncertainty. She'd always been so sure of her power to reshape reality through sheer force of will. But paper trails don't bend to willpower, and camera footage doesn't care about social status. The ballroom doors opened wider, spilling more light and curious faces into the corridor. Music drifted through. They'd moved on to the father-daughter dance now. The irony wasn't lost on me. I turned another page, my voice still steady. Asset Schedule C, showing original deed transfers and... I paused as Gloria sent another update. 2 minutes. Have police escort. Margaret's carefully constructed mask cracked just a fraction. She glanced at Richard, then at the growing crowd, then back at the documents in my hands. I recognized that look. She was calculating angles, looking for an escape route. But this time there wasn't one. Gloria arrived exactly like I knew she would. Crisp, professional, and right on time. The click of her sensible heels on concrete echoed through the garage like a judge's gavel. Behind her, 2 uniformed officers took up positions by the door, though I hadn't requested them. Sometimes karma provides its own security detail. Mr. Whitaker, she nodded, setting her briefcase on the sedan's hood. I've witnessed the live stream. Please present the documents for verification. I handed over the envelope with steady hands. Everything's here, Gloria, just as we prepared it last month. She pulled out her trust index and began comparing pages with methodical precision, the kind of precision that had made me choose her as my notary 15 years ago. Page 1, present. Page 2, present. Her voice carried clearly in the hushed garage. Margaret shifted her weight again, that designer dress probably feeling like a straitjacket now. Richard had stopped texting and stood perfectly still, like a deer caught in headlights. Note attempted interference with chain of custody, Gloria announced, her voice carrying the weight of legal authority. The live stream shows unauthorized access and attempted document manipulation. She looked up, making direct eye contact with Margaret and Richard. This will be recorded in the amendment. The corridor had gone silent except for Gloria's pen scratching against paper. Even the band's music seemed muffled, like the building itself was holding its breath. Pursuant to Section 7.3, Gloria continued, given documented interference, I am executing the amendment to remove Margaret Whitaker from all control provisions. She stamped each page with practiced efficiency. Emily Whitaker remains sole beneficiary with all secondary interests now void. Remember when I mentioned trouble comes dressed as celebration? Well, sometimes justice wears a simple black suit and carries a notary seal. Now see here. Richard stepped forward, his face flushed. This is clearly a misunderstanding. We were simply reviewing. Frank cleared his throat. Would you like to see the footage again? He held up his phone. I'm particularly interested in the part where you're photographing confidential documents and stuffing them in your pocket. Richard's mouth snapped shut. A few guests near the door whispered and stepped back, creating distance between themselves and Margaret's little circle. Social exile starts with inches and ends in miles. Mr. Whitaker, please sign here. Gloria pointed to each marked line. And here. Initial here. I signed where indicated. My signature as steady as it had been on Emily's school permission slips all those years ago. Each stroke of the pen felt like writing the final lines of a chapter that had stayed open far too long. The band struck up another song in the ballroom, something upbeat and celebratory. But through the open doors I could see the dance floor thinning. Guests were drifting toward the commotion in our direction, drawn by the kind of scandal that spreads through wedding receptions like wildfire. Notarization complete, Gloria announced, affixing her seal. She looked directly at Margaret. The amendment is executed and witnessed. All prior claims are void. A murmur rippled through the growing crowd. I caught fragments of whispers. Tried to steal. His own daughter's wedding. Can you imagine? Margaret's carefully constructed social facade was crumbling faster than day-old wedding cake. The woman who'd once told me I'd never amount to anything stood frozen, watching her power evaporate under fluorescent garage lights. I closed the pen and handed it back to Gloria. No need for speeches or accusations. The documents and video spoke louder than any words I could add. Sometimes the cleanest victories are the ones where you simply let truth do the heavy lifting. Behind me, Frank was already backing up the video to his secure cloud storage. Around us, the whispers had grown into open conversations, the kind that would echo through country club lounges and charity galas for months to come. I turned toward the exit. my work. Here finished. 25 years of quiet preparation had paid off in less than 25 minutes. The garage had become uncomfortably crowded as more guests pressed in, their faces showing that unique mix of embarrassment and fascination that only comes from watching the mighty fall. I walked out of that garage with my shoulders straight, not from pride, but from the simple relief of standing in truth. The night air had cooled, carrying the scent of late roses from the venue's garden. A few crickets chirped, probably the last chorus before autumn silenced them. You know that moment when you can feel the tide turning, when whispers and glances shift from judgment to something like respect. That's what followed me across the parking lot. Footsteps clicked behind me, lighter ones, familiar ones. I didn't turn around. Some moments need to come at their own pace, like early morning coffee or the first snow of winter. Then I felt Emily's arm slip through mine, her touch gentle but sure, the way it used to be when I'd walk her to school. "The car's ready, Dad," she said softly. The sedan waited exactly where this whole drama had started, its dark paint reflecting venue lights like stars on water. Someone had cleaned off the last traces of road dust, probably Frank's doing. He always did have an eye for details that matter. I helped Emily with her dress, making sure the fabric cleared the door before closing it. Some habits stick with you, don't they? Like all those times I'd checked her backpack was properly zipped or her mittens matched in winter. The driver's seat welcomed me like an old friend. I adjusted the mirror and caught glimpses of guests drifting toward their cars, phones glowing in the darkness. News travels fast these days, faster than Margaret probably expected when she planned her little power play. "They're all watching the video," Emily said, her phone screen illuminating her face. "Aunt Susan just texted. She's mortified. And the Hendersons cancelled their country club brunch with Mom tomorrow." I started the engine, its familiar purr drowning out the distant music from the venue. Through the windshield, I could see that crude no-entry sign with my photo, now lying face up on the asphalt where someone had dropped it. The paper caught the breeze, corner lifting like a surrender flag. Headlights bloomed behind us, first one pair, then another, then more. A quiet convoy forming up, like mourners at a funeral. Except this wasn't a funeral for me. No. This was a funeral for lies, for schemes, for the kind of arrogance that mistakes money for character. I eased the sedan forward, taking my time. The steering wheel felt solid under my hands, grounding me in the moment. Emily's fingers found mine on the gear shift, squeezing gently. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. The front tires met the fallen sign. I didn't speed up or slow down, just kept that steady pace I'd learned from decades of careful living. The paper crumpled under the weight, that red no-entry text disappearing beneath black rubber. In the rearview mirror, I watched the sign's edges flutter one last time before the back. Tires pressed it flat. Behind us, phone screens still glowed in car after car, Margaret's reputation dissolving with each share and forward. You spend enough years working with your hands, you learn something important. Pressure doesn't have to be dramatic to be effective. Sometimes the quietest force leaves the deepest mark. Emily's phone buzzed again. "Richard's sister just uninvited Mom from the winter fundraiser committee," she said, her voice carrying a mix of sadness and relief that only daughters can manage. I guided us toward the exit, that crushed sign growing smaller in my mirrors. The truth about people like Margaret and Richard, they don't fear losing money nearly as much as they fear losing face. And tonight, they'd lost both. Through the open window, cricket song mixed with the soft purr of engines behind us. The night air carried a hint of autumn, clean and crisp, like a fresh page waiting to be written. I glanced at that sign one last time, barely visible now in the red glow of brake lights. 25 years ago, Margaret told me I'd fade away, become nothing but a footnote in Emily's life. Looking at that crushed paper, I smiled and said what I'd known all along. Erase me and I'll write myself back bolder.